Okay, so I've hoped that folks have made their way in, and we're going to get started on our session today, the importance of emotional literacy for children and families. So welcome. Thank you so much for being here at our 2021 Leadership Summit. We are so glad that you've joined us to discuss this very important topic. My name is Hannah Zeller, and I am the Programs Manager here at DBSA. I am a social worker by background, and I have past experience in direct mental health care service delivery, as well as nonprofit management. I completed my Master's of Social Work in 2018, and I began focusing on DBSA's Supporting Youth Mental Health Initiative. So the Supporting Youth Mental Health Initiative at DBSA began with a goal. Our goal is to increase our capacity to serve children, teens, and young adults that live with mood disorders and their parents and caregivers. So at DBSA, we envision wellness for all people living with mood disorders. And we also know that early interventions can be meaningful when it comes to depression and bipolar, which is why we were keen to create the DBSA Mood Crew, which is a program that encourages parents and caregivers, as well as educators and clinicians, to begin these important conversations about emotions with our children. So here's what you can expect from this session. We're going to talk a little bit more about Mood Crew later, but let's begin with our session overview for today. So emotional literacy is made up of the ability to identify and understand our emotions. And increasing emotional literacy at an early age is important for children to be able to understand, process, and work through their emotions. So today we're going to describe how emotional literacy can enhance lifelong wellness outcomes. We're going to learn how parents and caregivers, clinicians, and educators can use the DBSA Mood Crew as a tool to increase emotional literacy, and we'll articulate the importance of emotional literacy. So let's dive in with the definition of emotional literacy. Claude Steiner defined emotional literacy in 1997 as the ability to understand your emotions, the ability to listen and empathize with others, and the ability to express emotions productively. So for the purposes of our chat today, we're going to talk about all those three areas in a little bit more detail and talk about why they are important as we lay the groundwork for emotional literacy for our children. All right, so let's talk a little bit about understanding emotions. How do we do that? All right, so emotions. What do we know so far? Emotions come and go. You know, many of us feel a lot of different emotions throughout the day. Some may last a few seconds, some may linger for longer. Our emotions can be mild, intense, or anywhere in between. So we know sometimes our emotions can feel really, really big, and other times they might be more subtle, but it's important to listen to our emotions no matter what we're feeling. And this one, so important. There are no good or bad emotions. Okay, let's dig into this a little bit more because it's important and something we definitely encourage with use of the DBSA Mood Crew. Has someone ever told you, don't be so angry, or why are you feeling so sad? We know that sometimes that's not the most helpful response. So we never really want to label our feelings as good or bad because all of our feelings are meant to be felt, and we need to listen to what we're feeling, and denying what we are feeling can, be harmful, essentially. And emotions, how do we understand them? I think a normal part of child development is growing up and being able to think more abstractly. And as we gain, a sense of our own individual selves and we become aware of how we are feeling, we can better understand our emotions overall. But children do not learn emotions overnight. It's definitely a process. And that's why it's important to set a primer in early life to begin this process of healthy development. So Professor Steve Peters outlines the following on helping children understanding their emotions. So first, we want to talk about emotions. It's important to lay the groundwork for kids that they can talk about their emotions, and again, in that non-judgmental way. So by having kids articulate what they're feeling, we're setting the primer for them to understand that throughout their life. And if you think about learning a new language, for example, have you ever heard that children can more easily learn a different language from their own? Well, why is this? Research has shown that it is easier for a young child to pick up a new language because their neural pathways are primed to absorb everything about the new world that they have just entered in. They are primed for learning. So it's important at an early age to allow kids to explore this new language of emotions. And again, in a non-judgmental way, because we don't want to reinforce to our kids that they shouldn't feel negative emotions. We know that repressing negative emotions can lead to long-term struggles with our ability to understand and process hard feelings. Another primer to set for kids early in life is seeking help, right? We want to be able to model for our kids that seeking help and asking for help is okay. We live in a culture that definitely overemphasizes self-reliance. And, while self-reliance is important, we also want to model for our kids the importance of asking for help, and that is okay to do. Another primer definitely to set in young life for kids is trying new things. Testing our comfort zone is a really important skill, and growing up will, at some point require us to do something that's a little bit out of our comfort zone. So it's a really great way to begin having children try new things, test out that distress tolerance a little bit here, because, even as adults, I think we understand that trying new things can be hard. So giving them that primer in early life, trying new things is real important. And then the last one, learning to share. It's important to teach kids about learning to share at an early age, because that's really priming us to have greater empathy in our later life. So for kids, learning to share, it brings them the reminder there are other kids around and other people who have needs. And it's a really good foundation, that building block of empathy. So let's talk about maybe some unproductive emotional conditioning that, our culture or our families kind of give to us. So, some of these things can be less helpful than others. And so let's review some of these common, unproductive emotional conditioning that may show up in our communities, right? Treating others' feelings as more important than your own. Do we all know somebody who's like this? We see this example very commonly when there's someone who's always putting the needs of others before their own. And while, normally this is a very generous and giving person, we want to be modeling for our kids that, taking care of ourselves and acknowledging our own feelings is just as important as acknowledging the feelings of others, right? And then what about don't do anything that might cause a negative feeling in someone else, right? I think a lot of times we're definitely taught to avoid conflict. And, there are ways that we can deal in a conflict in a more healthy way. So avoidance of conflict long-term is going to have lasting negative effects potentially. So we definitely don't want to just avoid causing conflict. There are healthy ways to work through conflict. Don't express anger, right? We definitely have kind of a cultural conditioning around anger. We've been taught to kind of tame our anger, but we all feel anger at one point or another, and that's okay. We just really need the tools to help work through our anger in a way that's going to be helpful. And, that is going to help us deal with those feelings instead of repressing them. We have some great examples later in our session from Angry from the DBSA Mood Crew, who's going to talk to us more about anger. And then the other, conversely, we might also use anger to get attention. And this we can commonly see in kids maybe as kind of an attention seeking behavior. But if this is happening, if there's a kid who's acting out on their anger, they're using it to get attention, we might want to pay attention to what's going on for them. And again, we're going to look at some angry resources later in the session, and she's going to help us out with that. Ignoring our feelings. We live in a society that likes to tell us to suck it up sometimes. And we know that that's okay to an extent, but we know that if we ignore our feelings for a long period of time, we can definitely end up using unhealthy coping mechanisms, which we'll talk a little bit more about later as well. But yeah, so we don't want to be ignoring our feelings. Don't trust others with your feelings. Keep them to yourselves, right? So this is really ignoring the fact that our feelings happen in our relationships. And so when we're able to share our feelings with others and normalize them, finding those trusted people in our life, finding the community that we can share with, that's going to end up leading to, again, normalizing. We all have feelings. We just need a trusted and safe way to communicate them with others. And then this one, never trust feelings, only trust logic. I think there's a good deal of cultural conditioning with this one too. We like to define what is logical by what can be seen or what is fact oriented. And, even though our feelings are unseen, we still need to trust our emotions, and trust what they're telling us and being able to listen to ourselves in that way. And then here's a really unproductive one, right? Be happy all the time. We live in a culture that really emphasizes, that we want to feel happy all the time, but that is just not attainable. And I think overemphasizing trying to be happy can really lead us to a place where maybe we're glossing over some of the feelings that we're actually having. So we definitely don't want to fall into the trap that, thinking that we can be happy all the time. All right, so we've talked about the first part of Steiner's definition about understanding emotions. We talked about, how we understand emotions. We talked about unproductive emotional conditioning. And let's move on to the second part of his definition, which is about listening and empathizing with others. All right, so what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to recognize, understand, and share the thoughts and feelings of another person, animal, or fictional character. It involves experiencing another person's point of view rather than just one's own, and it enables pro-social or helping behaviors that come from within rather than being forced. Let's talk about the timeline of empathetic development for a child. I thought this first fact was fascinating. Children as young as 18 hours can show some responsiveness to other infants' distress around them. Early experiences between caregivers and their children lay the groundwork for lifelong empathy. So children who feel safe and secure and loved develop better attachment with their early caregivers than others. And we know that attachment research, attachment can be a predictor for the later quality of life for that child, their ability to develop healthy and meaningful relationships. And that's, all kind of informed by the way that we attach to our early caregivers. So again, that whole attachment and secure attachment in early childhood is very important for laying the groundwork for our empathy. And then by preschool, children, they're aware that they have separate bodies and feelings and experiences than other children, and they can kind of begin to understand the emotions of others. And then by 6 or 7 years old, children are more capable of seeing another person's perspective And as their executive functioning continues to mature, they become more capable of handling their own distress. And in addition to that, they become capable of trying to problem solve if they see another child in distress as well. So this is kind of the timeline that a child is going to go through as they begin to develop empathy. And we can know that our children have developed empathy by looking for some of these indicators. So the child understands, again, they are this distinct person from everyone around them, and they realize, they have different feelings and perspectives than just their own. We want to see that the child can recognize the feelings in themselves and in others and be able to name those feelings, and that the child can regulate their emotional responses. The child can put themselves in someone else's shoes and imagine how they might feel. And the child can imagine what kind of action or response might help that person feel better. So these are some good indicators, knowing that our child is on the path to healthy, empathetic development. And then I really like this perspective. Empathy is show and tell. So while empathy cannot really formally be taught to our children, we really want to encourage that we're modeling, we're storytelling, we're using communication and play, and healthy emotional coaching can really lay the groundwork for healthy development of empathy throughout the lifespan. So those are the first two parts of Steiner's definition. We've covered understanding emotions and the importance of developing empathy as a skill for lifelong emotional literacy. Now let's talk about the last section of Steiner's definition, expressing emotions in a healthy way. So before we talk about expressing emotions in a healthy way, what are some unhealthy ways of emotional coping? These unhealthy coping mechanisms we'll talk through right now, they don't necessarily just apply to children, but they can be maladaptive responses throughout the lifespan. So let's start with the first one, denial. Being in denial of our emotions can really impact us if we don't express them. We can kind of bottle up our emotions to the point that we end up expressing them in a way that's unhealthy or unproductive. Withdrawal, we know that withdrawal from others, isolating oneself, that can definitely be a symptom of a mood disorder. Withdrawal can also be a way of avoiding hard feelings or avoiding our social responsibilities. So there's a lot of other problems that can derive from us withdrawing, such as loneliness, misunderstanding, distorted thinking, and anger. So, healthy interactions really can keep a good balance for us. Bullying, sometimes if folks are feeling unwell, they can take their emotions out on others. And this is not a healthy way to express our emotions. And it can be damaging for our relationships and how we conduct ourselves with others. And then self-harm, hopefully we're not seeing this in our young ones, but we know, it can be a really unhealthy emotional coping mechanism. But self-harm can take many forms, from cutting to self-starvation or any other kind of dangerous behavior. Many people self-harm as a way to try to control their emotional pain. And self-harm may bring a temporary relief from those emotions. But in the long run, we know that self-harm, unfortunately, can become, an addictive behavior, a maladaptive coping behavior to deal with unhealthy emotions. And then, of course, substance use, use in later life of alcohol or other drugs can also, again, be a maladaptive coping mechanism. If we really don't want to feel our emotions, we can turn to substances to kind of numb those feelings away. But again, this is a long-term kind of unhealthy coping mechanism with emotions. So let's talk about some healthy emotional coping. And we have a good acronym to take home with you today on this one, PATH. So when we are first feeling an emotion, we want to pause, right? We don't want to necessarily act on our emotions right away. So we're starting to feel something, just taking a pause around it. And then we want to acknowledge, what we are feeling. Just say, hey, am I mad right now? Giving ourselves some time to acknowledge what we are feeling. And then we want to think through exactly what it is we are feeling and try to determine why we might be feeling that way. And at this point, I think what's really important to remember is we don't want to judge how we're feeling, right? I think especially when we're feeling feelings of anger or sadness, we can jump to judging ourselves. Like, why am I feeling so angry? Why am I feeling so sad? And, instead of trying to take that corrective action at that point, let's just think, okay, why am I feeling this emotion? And again, just in a non-judgmental way. And then the last step is help. So after we've paused, we've acknowledged, we've thought through, okay, I think I'm feeling angry right now, then we can decide how we might want to help ourselves. So if we're just feeling angry, do we need to just sit and feel mad for a minute? Do we need to take a walk around the block? Do we want to pull out our journal and write about it? Whatever is going to help us be able to feel that emotion and work through it, it's really going to be what is most helpful. So that is PATH, and a very helpful acronym to remember in terms of healthy emotional coping. So we have now talked through all three parts of Steiner's definition. We talked about understanding our emotions, we talked about empathy, and we talked about what can go into understanding, identifying our emotions in a healthy way. So now we're going to move on to talk more about the DBSA Mood Crew. And I know, even adults have problems understanding their emotions sometimes. So even though this program was created for children ages 4 to 10, I really think all the tools and exercises that we've created for the DBSA Mood Crew can be helpful to anyone across the lifespan. And I think that there are a lot of things that are being done in our school systems right now. I hope you've all heard of social emotional learning. It's quite the buzzword in our educational system. But we at DBSA wanted to create this resource, this cast of 10 emotion-based characters, so that parents and caregivers can have resources that are free to download, free to print off and use with kids. So let's meet the crew now. So again, these are our 10 emotion-based characters to teach children what it's like to experience each of these emotions. So here you can see we have angry, excited, calm, lonely, scared, confident, worried, embarrassed, happy, and sad. And here are some of the first set of resources that we came out with last year with the DBSA Mood Crew. Each character has their own bio, their own worksheet and coloring pages, which can help you get to know each of these emotions a little bit better. And then we also have created games and dialogues that can help parents and caregivers, more fully illustrate each emotion. So let's talk about some of these games. Moods in Motion, that's one of our interactive games that adults can help facilitate with kids. And these activities they make the emotions come alive a little bit more, right? So acting, writing, drawing, they're all ways to help understand the mind-body experience, which builds awareness for kids to understand their emotions. And the objective of our Moods in Motion game is, again, to have children begin to feel these emotions in their bodies, because we know how important that mind-body connection is. And in addition to that, there's an interactive game like Mirror Mirror, which is an important game to also kind of help build empathy, allow that kid to mirror the emotions of another. We also have a game called Matching Moods, which is a super fun matching game. All of the Mood Crew characters have their own cards and you can flip them all over to make a match. And once you do make a match, it's a great time to ask a child a question about that emotion. So let's say, you're flipping your matches over and you get calm as a match. Maybe this is a good time to ask your child a question like, what was the time you think you felt most calm and what was that experience like? So again, a real fun game, just a matching game, but it's a good way to begin asking our children questions about emotions and begin those important conversations. And then the other resource that we have are the dialogues. And the dialogues are, they're a story between two of the Mood Crew characters. And it gives examples about what these emotions might feel like in real life. And at the end of the dialogue, we've provided a set of questions that, again, parents and caregivers, educators and clinicians can use to kind of prompt kids and have them think a little bit more critically about the dialogue and how the emotions communicated within that dialogue. Another resource that we came out with last year is the Mood Crew Mood Tracker, which is called Days of the Feels. So that's a great way to track, moods of your child throughout a given week. And I really think actually the best way to demonstrate this is by playing a short video from a mom who actually uses the Days of Feels with her son. So let's have Andrea take it away for us.
I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, so sadly, it came as no shock to me when I found out that my son also struggles with anxiety. It's heartbreaking to watch, especially during this time. Doing remote learning triggers my son's anxiety, and it's awful to watch. Having this tool really helps because it helps my son identify his emotions, and then that helps me help him work through it. And my kids are going through so much right now. On top of navigating this global pandemic, my kids are also navigating a really icky divorce. So we're going to take all the help we can get. Okay, now show me, Juju. What's today? Today is Thursday, right? So I want you to bubble in. Look at all of the monsters. What monster are we feeling right now? This is our Mood Crew, right?
Oh no, that's what I just want. Oh no.
Scared or worried? Well, you can fill in both if you want to. You want to fill in both? Can you tell me what you're worried about?
To do school.
What makes you nervous about doing school?
I don't like to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this, okay?
I need help. Hi guys. So let's say you're using a feeling, whatever feeling you want. So just a second, I want to tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how easy this chart is. So back to the video. So whatever your feelings is, you just circle it and color it the whole thing is.
You feel weird or embarrassed about telling mommy or daddy or anyone how you feel. Is this an easy way to do it? Because all you have to do is bubble it in and then we know.
Basically, yes.
Basically, yes.
Sad, scared, worried.
Yep.
Scared, sad.
Yep.
Worried.
And that's okay, right? Sometimes we feel sad, scared, and worried. And other times we feel calm, confident, And
So that happened with me. First, I was feeling like sort of like one feeling, and then the next one, changed.
you're able to show mommy that now you're feeling happy and calm, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you to Andrea for that. I think that is a really good demonstration of how the days of the feels can work. And our tester there, he said that he was feeling sad, scared, and worried. And then by talking through it, by the end, he's feeling a little bit more calm and happy. So again, having these tools is a really good way to sit down with our kids and talk through what they might be feeling in a given week. All right, let's move on. So I wanted to let you know all of the resources that I just talked about, the bios, the worksheets, the coloring sheets, the games and activities. They're all in this one resource book that you can download. And again, all of these resources in one packet on dbsalliance.org/mood crew. So you can go there to get that. But as I mentioned, our friend Angry has volunteered to be our guest star for today. So let's talk about how we might actually use some of the Mood Crew resources to help children better understand emotions. So again, these are the basic worksheets that we've provided in the first set of Mood Crew resources. And in this first worksheet that we see here, we ask the following questions. We ask, what are some times that a person might feel angry? We ask, when you feel angry, what does your body feel like? And then we ask for them to describe a situation in which they might have felt angry. So, it's important that we have them work through these questions. That first question, what is some times that someone else might feel angry? That's a really good way to sense how children are able to identify the emotions of others. And then, this question about when we feel angry, how does that feel in our body? This mind-body connection that we've mentioned a couple of times, it's super important, and it's super important, especially for young kids, because kids' brains, they might not be able to fully cognitively process what emotion they're feeling. They might get a better indication from their body sensations, what they are feeling. So if we hear that kids are having a stomach ache, or maybe they're having a headache, or their muscles are kind of tensing up, that's a good indication to kids to be able to let them know, okay, something's going on with my body. Let's try to connect that to understanding how emotions are feeling. And, as a parent, just good to be aware that, again, sometimes kids might not be able to express fully what emotions they're feeling in their words, but they might be able to better tell you what's happening in their body. So that's why we ask that question. And then again, that last question on the page is asking kids to write about a time that they felt angry and to talk a little bit more about what that emotion was like. Now, if you have a child who, you don't imagine they would want to fill out and write on a worksheet, or maybe they're not at the age where they can fully, write out sentences, another way that I would recommend to do this activity is print off the coloring sheet. Here you can see we have a blank coloring sheet of angry. And then while your child is coloring in angry, just begin to start asking some of these questions and have the conversation that way. So again, all of our Mood Crew characters, they have this basic worksheet and they have the coloring sheet. And I think it's a great way to just start diving into understanding these emotions. And then, we also have our Mood Crew monthly program. So again, thank you to Angry, who's volunteered to show us her new resource. But at the beginning of 2021, we wanted to create a new resource to help us to continue to, understand these emotions through different activities. So let's look at Angry's road trip rage. This is an activity that is based on a cognitive behavioral approach to managing our emotions. And cognitive behavioral therapy is an approach that focuses on challenging and changing cognitive distortions and behaviors, as well as improving our emotional regulation and our personal coping. So this activity comes with a comic strip to get everybody started. We see here Angry, who is going on a road trip with her family. And, at first we see that there's a triggering event, Angry in this comic strip, she's riding in the car with her family. She sees a restaurant on the side of the road that she wants to stop at, and she yells to her mom, please, can we stop? I want to go to this restaurant. And then we get some negative thinking because Angry's mom says, they can't stop right now. They're going to go to a different restaurant because that's the restaurant that Angry's dad wants to go to. And Angry gets kind of mad at her mom for saying this. And so this is when, this negative thinking kind of begins for Angry. And then we see that Angry has an emotional response. She's getting upset with her parents. They didn't agree with her about where to stop on the road trip. So she's starting to feel some emotions, right? And then, there's a physical response. Angry in this situation, she begins to feel hot and she feels her fists kind of tensing up so she can feel this emotion in her body. And then we also get the behavioral response. And that's kind of the last piece. And unfortunately, in Angry's story, she's angry. So she takes her dad's newspaper and she throws it out the window. So this is kind of just a funny kind of comic illustration that works us through, what is a triggering event? What is negative thinking we might be having? What are our emotional responses, physical, and then, what is the behavior that we're going to act on? So here's the other part of that resource. Once you've worked through the comic strip, definitely recommend that you download and print off these worksheets. And then you can use that in any kind of situation. If you want to work through with a child, you can have them describe their own triggering event, their own negative thinking, their emotional response, again, the physical response that comes, and then, of course, the last thing, that behavioral response. And if we think back to PATH, pause, acknowledge, think, and then help, we want to get to a place that before that behavioral response, we're understanding what's going to be the most beneficial. So we get to the place of the behavioral response before we're acting out, before we're throwing the newspaper out of the window. All right, so this is just Angry's example, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other new Mood Crew monthly resources that we've come out with. Our friend Calm, she has created some guided meditations. So we have deep belly breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, and a scenic imagery meditation. That deep belly breathing is really important for kids to understand. If I take a really deep breath, that can provide me some good sense of calm. So we love to teach the basic deep belly breathing. Imagine, again, that's a scenic imagery meditation, and it helps kids to be able to understand how visualization can really help to kind of calm us down, especially if we're not feeling great. And then relax, that's our progressive muscle relaxation. Again, that progressive muscle relaxation is so good for the mind-body connection, because when we do progressive muscle relaxation, we're tensing up our muscles and then we're releasing them. So it really gives us a good sense of how we feel in our bodies. Then our friend Lonely came out with letters from Lonely. So we have one that is about making a trip, where kids can imagine taking a trip. So that's really helping kids to create some creativity in their responses. We have a love letter from Lonely, and we also have a gratitude letter. And gratitude, we know, is an important part of positive psychology. So definitely want to have kids begin understanding and practicing gratitude. And then our friend Confident, who definitely loves to be the hero of the Mood Crew. Confident came out with a resource called Confidence Cape. And I love this resource because it's really encouraging kids to think about their strengths. We know that, one way of kind of helping us to deal with any kind of negative emotions is relying on the strengths that we do have, and really, reinforcing that we do have those strengths. Really good thing to bring up with kids. And Confident also has a card game activity that again can be helpful for kind of facilitating that confidence boosting kind of questions for kids. And then we have Happy, and Happy has a real fun word search, which can get kids thinking about what makes them happy. And again, a gratitude journal, because we know that that's an important part of positive psychology, an important part of helping kids think about what they're grateful for. And gratitude is such a good practice, especially when we're trying to develop that empathy. And then we have Excited, who created this summer bucket list, which super fun for the summer, but you could really use it at any time of the year. I think especially for kids who might be saying that they're feeling bored or maybe uninspired, something fun like Excited's bucket list can help get kids thinking about what they are excited about, what they are interested in. And then lastly, we have Worried's Woes. So Worried came out with 3 different worksheets, which are all about recognizing when we're feeling worried, reasoning with those worries that we're feeling, and then kind of rewriting our worries so that we can get a different perspective on it. So those 3 worksheets, especially probably helpful for kids who might be feeling some anxiety. And then we also have a resource that's featuring all of the Mood Crew characters for back to school. So this is a really helpful worksheet that, again, all the characters are in it, and ask some good questions of kids, give some tips about returning back to school, which a lot of kids might have been feeling especially emotional about this year. We also are awaiting our resources from Scared, Sad, and Embarrassed. So within the next few months, you will be able to see new resources for these characters as well. And then I just wanted to leave us with a quote today, because I think it really kind of encapsulates, again, what we've been talking about, the importance of emotional literacy. So Mark Brackett says, "My message for everyone is the same, that if we can learn to identify, express, and harness our feelings, even the most challenging ones, we can use those emotions to help us create positive, satisfying life." And so Mark Brackett, he's a research psychologist and the founding director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, and the professor of the Child Study Center at Yale University. So I thought that quote kind of encapsulates all we've been talking about today. All right, so questions. I see that there's already a question in the chat, but if you have any questions for me, feel free to populate them. We have a couple more minutes of this session. Is there a way to get copies of these slides? Yes, I will go ahead and upload these slides at the end of the session, but I'm also going to, if you want to just email me directly, you can go ahead and email programs@dbsalliance.org to ask me any other questions you might have about this session. And again, you can find all the Mood Crew resources at dbsalliance.org/moodcrew. I'm seeing some other questions are coming in. Oh, great question. What is the best way for extended relatives, aunts, uncles, grandparents to introduce this to these kids, to their kids? I think that grandparents love Mood Crew. We've heard that. So yeah, if you are the aunt, the uncle, the relative of someone, of a child who'd be interested in these resources, again, I recommend going to dbsalliance.org/moodcrew, download the whole workbook. And really, it kind of depends on the age of the child. But sometimes I think it's best to just maybe lay out those resources, see what they're gravitating towards. Maybe the easiest way to start with kids is, let's do the coloring sheets. Let's color in these characters and start talking about them. And other kids might be more interested in starting with, games or activities, for example. Any resources for teens? great question. Unfortunately, we do not have resources such as the Mood Crew for teens, but it's definitely something that as a part of our Supporting Youth Mental Health Initiative at DBSA, we're trying to prioritize. So definitely would encourage, to stay tuned for that. We're really keen on starting teen support groups. But the other resource that is coming to mind off the top is that we've just started a new podcast series called I'm Living Proof, a letter to my younger self, where young adults write a letter to their younger self if they live with depression and bipolar, and they provide their younger self empathy and perspective on the journey that they've taken so far. So I'm Living Proof, a letter to my younger self, we think is a really good resource for young adults who are living with a mood disorder, but also, for teens who maybe been diagnosed for the first time, and maybe could use some inspiration from people who have gone through some similar experiences to them. So you can also find that on the DBSA website. Oh, this is a great question. I see that we're kind of running towards the end of time, but love this question, so want to make sure that I answer it. Sometimes we are unaware of unintended messages we send to our children and grandchildren. Can you recommend some things that we do to recognize some of these unintended messages? Again, I think that that unhealthy emotional conditioning slide gives us some good idea about the kind of cultural messages we might get about emotions, right? Be happy all the time, or don't talk to others about your feelings. So I just think being really aware that we want to have open conversations with our children about emotions. We don't want to judge the emotions that they are feeling, so that they can express those emotions to us in a healthy and helpful way. And I see more questions that I can't answer because we're running up on time. But again, feel free to email me anytime, programs@dbsalliance.org. And I will also try to get this deck up, or just feel free to email me. And yeah, it's been great to be with you all today. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.